Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, popular media personality, investigative journalist, and host of The Breakfast Show on 702, Bongani Bingwa.
Don't know about popular, but it's great to be here. Thank you for that warm welcome. Well, good afternoon, folks, and thank you to all our guests and everyone who's going to be joining us today for the PPS Retirement Summit. As you've heard, my name is Bongani Bingwa, and it really is my great pleasure to be your host this afternoon for what I hope is going to be an invaluable session discussing retirement and how to make it work for you. So wherever you are, you likely already are thinking about the future and whether or not you are prepared for it. You know, for a lot of people, retirement seems like just a big word or something they will get to one of these days, which is why South Africans are such notoriously bad savers. So perhaps it's an opportunity today to look at it this way. It's about preparing for a goal that all of us understand, right? Financial freedom. It's about designing the future that we want and not arriving at some unknown destination unprepared. And so the fundamental question that we must all be able to answer is this: do you know what your future looks like, and are you ready to meet it? Intrigued? Well, stay engaged with quality speakers, thought leaders who are going to shape what that answer could look like for you. Do you have a financial strategy? Where do you want to live in your golden years? How? And would your current spending habits be sustainable without the income you are receiving today? What do you owe? How much of your monthly expenses are stealing from your plan of financial freedom? Or are you waiting for some miraculous windfall? Many of us are likely going to live longer than many of our parents and previous generations. Many of them who are still around are still already living well into old age. I always think about my own mother, who is 83 this year and in relatively good health and quite strong. Now, she's a fiercely independent woman. She still lives on her own, and in fact, she refuses to live in any home, even those of her children. Have you heard the popular idea that the first person to get to 150 is already alive today? You've heard that idea, right? Robotics, nanotechnology, and high-speed computational neuroscience are going to become the new reality. We're going to have intelligent gizmos integrated with our bodies. People are worried about the vaccine. Wait till you see what's coming. So, how old will I get to then, right? That's the question. And what will that life look like, and how do I prepare for it? Our event today is going to provide you with options for your retirement as we discuss your mental, emotional, physical, and of course, financial readiness to make retirement work for you. Without any further ado then, I'm going to invite Ayanda Siboni to the stage. Ayanda has been the PPS Group Executive for Marketing and Stakeholder Relations since 2017. She has more than 20 years' experience in the insurance sector and has worked in the product and distribution environments, as well as, of course, all of that complementing her current role in the classical marketing sense. Ayanda, welcome.
Thank you, Bongani, and thank you so much for agreeing to be our moderator today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Please tell me a little bit about PPS. The billboard behind us has been showing us the long history that you come from.
80 years ago, Bongani, 8 dentists got together because they realized they could help each other out. That community has grown from 8 to 150,000 professionals. We boast the captains of industries, professors, and world-renowned professionals as part of the PPS family, because we are there to enable and to protect their dreams. And we do this while sharing our profits. Bongani, thousands of our members have received more than R1 million to their retirement savings, which is a boost they get just because they are members of PPS. They accumulate this value over the years, and it vests at retirement. I can't wait for the day that I get my retirement asset one day.
Look, we know it's not even really a secret, right? Many South Africans don't have adequate savings, right, to take care of their needs in retirement. We talk a lot in this country. We're well known for having talks about talks, right? Why will this summit be different?
This summit will certainly be different to other events that you've attended. The speakers bring different expertise. They will leave you not only reflecting, but empowered. PPS will not leave you in the lurch with no action plan after this. We have qualified advisors that are on standby for people who are serious about changing their path and those who want to build a different future for themselves. Post this summit, we help you with essentials like estate planning, investing, and putting a financial plan, a detailed financial plan in place. It doesn't matter whether, coming in, you feel like your finances are in a shambles. Our job is to help you get the best outcomes. We'll also be sharing some tools with members so that they can use afterwards. So, for example, Louis and I recorded a podcast series called Money Mindfulness with PPS in conversation with Louis Ferry. It's available on Spotify, and there we have deep, meaningful, and empowering conversations about money behaviors, and the attendees can use this as part of their journey to financial wellness.
I want to talk about pre-retirement today for a few minutes with you. I think we way too into the future for money happiness. I think money happiness can happen earlier in your life, but it's by habit. I don't think it's a sum of money early in your life or an inheritance. I think it's a way of living. It's such a pity, that we chase through 40 years to get to that magic point of having money peace of mind. And a few habits, I share with younger professionals every day of my life is to maybe roll back the movie to your present and to see if you can introduce some of these habits into your life that will make you live a peaceful life 12 months a year and not have this eternal battle every month end with this money thing. I mean, so many people forever have this fight with money, this sort of unhealthy relationship with money. And I think it's so unnecessary to do it like that. So I want to share like the connecting the dots thing in children's books. I just want to draw a little castle for you. If you want to equate this to your safe haven or financial peace of mind, you can do that. And let's just connect the dots quickly in a simple picture and talk through the few habits, the handful of habits I would love younger professionals and post-retirement people to introduce to their own lives. It just brings you in harmony with this whole financial thing. Because, the scary thing is professional people and members of PPS, we can never have an excuse we earn too little. So when you invest in your income potential, it means you can practice your income longer as well. And when you take the first third off, you buffer yourself from the back end of your timeline, which is a very important thing to do. Don't hope for the best. Cover yourself from the back. The third or so you take off the table. What do you do with it? You make sure you cover your risks. And that's what PPS stands for, to make sure you take all those unfortunate and hopefully never used risks out of the way, that no calamity can topple you and put you in desperation. That's the first bit of the third. Second bit, make sure you save enough. Put it in a sound investment portfolio, no fancy assets, a simple diversified portfolio of quality assets. And then what we've learned over the last 18 months as well, you better have cash on hand. People don't have cash buffers. They believe in credit and credit access to crisis credit. But guys, when the crisis is there, the tap of crisis credit is closing as well. So, I mean, it's a fluid place out there. Make sure you have cash on hand when you need it. I think we'll see much more of this going forward, where people will be more conservative. Third last habit of traveling through life financially free and not having a battle with money is this one. When you buy, enjoy your money. You work very hard for it. In other words, we're talking about the 2/3 left now. that's not taken to tomorrow. But one of the biggest gifts to give yourself is to buy value for money. Don't spend because you can afford or because the price is low enough. Spend because you get value for it. Don't ever give away 10 rand and get 8 rand for it in terms of value. When you spend 10, at least get 10 in terms of value. So have a value consciousness. I don't believe in this whole thing, you may not spend, you may not enjoy and so on, and then eventually the third becomes 50% of putting it away for tomorrow. I've seen cases like that as well. You know what? That's a sense of desperation as well. There's nothing joyful in that. Enjoy your hard-earned money, but don't feel sort of compelled to just get rid of your money. That's the very important other habit. So the old boring word budget sits there under that habit. Allocating your money before it's leaving your house. And not keeping book after it left. It's a bit late then, before it leaves the house. Habit 9, in terms of traveling financially freer through your life. Beware of debt. Beware of debt. It's the most, I suspect, it's the biggest moment of genius in humanity, where we figured out a way of using tomorrow's income today to lift our present lifestyle. It's genius. There's no other animal on earth that does it. A bird can never eat tomorrow's seeds. It has to wait for tomorrow. Humans figure this one out. So it's genius, a moment of genius. But unfortunately, is one of the sources of misery of the human as well. Even nations are doing it now. They borrow their grandkids' money to live their own lifestyle at this point in time, and they say, whatever, is their problem one day. Slashing interest rates to make it affordable. We got used to debt, living off tomorrow's money today. Be careful, especially lifestyle debt. You guys know what lifestyle debt can do to you. Trade around it. Trade around crisis credit. I just think you shouldn't like debt. I've seen horror stories play out around gearing, leveraging, all those cool words for debt. It's someone else's capital you borrow today, and that someone saved the money. They had the discipline to save it, and you tap into it. I just think from a retirement point of view and from a financial freedom point of view, you won't fall behind if you don't like debt. Beware of all the promises around leveraging. Last habit of personal financial freedom is this one, is to make sure you have on your balance sheet assets that support you and don't become dead weight in your life. I've seen so many so-called assets in people's lives that behave like liabilities. Keep you awake, they're expensive, they don't contribute to the quality of your life, but you believe this one thing will one day happen. Have a lean and mean balance sheet and have assets on them that serve you. And again, from an advisory point of view, I know PPS are helping people to make those decisions. And the last list under this habit of making sure that you have proper assets, just a quick checklist. What would you regard as a proper investment portfolio? In other words, the main pillars supporting a proper investment portfolio. Handful of things, handful of simple things. The first important thing is a real asset, a blue blood asset, appreciates in value without you having to do anything. How simple it is. If you invest in a diversified portfolio of quality assets in the world, over the last 120 years we're talking, you are always beating inflation by about 4 to 5% without doing anything. You carry on with your life, invest in your income potential, and do all the wonderful other things. That market will look after you. And there's no mythical thing about that market. It's just that people work it. They sweat it. That's where you put your money then. So the first important thing is, don't have assets that ask you to come and work for them. Because think about this now. When you earn your money, you pay your taxes, you pay your way, and now you invest in the asset. And the asset asks you to work for your money again. It comes down to the point that you work twice for the same money. It's not clever. Second time around, you shouldn't work for the same money again. Second point. Guys, beware of funny advisors out there. Beware of crazy deals out there and once-in-a-lifetime thingies. And these promises of massive returns, you know where that's going, always. Do your investments through proper institutions, well-regulated institutions, advisors with great reputations. You work so hard for these earnings. Don't let it run away from you through an investment. And then I think, because we don't know what's happening in the world, diversify your investments well. And we're talking quality shares here now. I'm not saying, something in that asset class and something over there and so on. Just good advice, well diversified. That if something happens to one of them, you're not left in destitute. I think a good asset is clinically priced as well. You don't wonder what it's worth. You can see what people are willing to pay for it at this moment. That's a good asset. And all the wishful thinking going on in the asset market. This will sell one day for. You want to see what an asset is worth. And a dynamic market as well. Guys, beware of being sentimental about assets. You should be hands-off, clinical when you look at an asset. It should serve you. You shouldn't be in love with an asset. It should be tradable when you need to trade portions of it. It shouldn't be bulky, locked in. It should be available when you need it. We're talking retirement here as well. So many people after retirement sit with an asset base that's way too bulky, and they can't get bits and pieces of income whenever they need it. Tradable. I think the people investing with you in those asset classes, take notice of them because you want to be in good company. That's the important thing there as well. Need to be income friendly, especially after retirement. When you want to draw money, you must be able to draw your money, not being caught into some sort of structure. No debt allowed against these assets. No debt allowed against these assets. One of the biggest pitfalls of wealth is to use that wealth as collateral for some sort of thing. Never mind signing surety for someone else. No debt allowed in this portfolio. And guys, the bottom line is quality listed shares in great companies all over the globe. That's how simple it is. There's no smarter place to look after you, especially your retirement funds. And please don't go for excess returns. Inflation plus 4, 5, proven over 120 years. Anything more than that, danger.
Where did it all start? Well, when I researched this question, it was quite interesting to find that it's a very modern concept. In fact, it began in 1889 when the then German Chancellor enacted retirement and retirement age in order to assist with youth unemployment. He put in 70 years old, but quickly changed that to 65, and we then found other Western nations following suit. Is retirement still relevant in the modern context? It still remains very much a Western concept and is difficult to compare across the globe. Research has shown us that cultural tenets are definitely prevalent in retirement. Therefore, the question that came to mind was, do people in all countries actually retire? We found that not all retirees are old, and nor are all elderly retired. In Western culture, it's an individually earned right to a time of relaxation and leisure. However, in some Eastern societies, it's inconceivable. Let's have a look at what the mortality tables tell us. Interestingly, tracking data over time, if you were born at the dawn of the 1800s, you were expected to live to 29. 1950, you are now 50. Today it is 85. And as Bongani said earlier, those first 100-year-old and 150-year-old babies are apparently walking amongst us, or certainly crawling amongst us. While these numbers do vary, country by country, the industrialization of the world has led medical enhancements and advancements to such a degree that our lifespans are increasing. This, of course, does contribute to one of the key risks in our retirements, that of longevity risk. Outliving the funding that you've created for your formal retirement years. Let's now take a look very specifically at the professionals and zone in on what their retirement mortality looks like. On this table, the very first line that you can see, in fact, the first two lines, are the general South African public. The bottom line is our gentlemen. The line above it is our ladies. Ladies live longer than gentlemen. And we can see there that the probability for 100% being alive in South Africa is around 68.3 years. Let's bring in our professionals. So again, the first line, but much further out than the standard South African mortality rate, is our professional men, followed by our professional women. What this graph is actually telling us is that our professionals live 10 to 15 years longer than the average South African. This, of course, means that in the professional market, you absolutely need to be planning for that longer retirement. However, I just want to mention three other risks that are very relevant in your retirement. That of inflation, consumption, and market risk. Living longer and providing for what could be 30 plus years does require an active pre-retirement and post-retirement life plan, anchored in professional advice and management. Stepping into the softer issues now, that are contributing to whether retirement is still relevant or not. Let's talk about intentional living. The revolution evolution, as the slide says, is quite an oxymoron, because revolution says something that happens really quickly and changes lives, and evolution is more of a gentle change. However, the revolution evolution has been happening for a few hundred years now. There's the gentleness. But each time it happens, it has a massive change on retirees and on the way we look at work. Looking at the first year, 1784, mechanization came to us through water and steam. Then our next era sorry, I can't read that far, 1870, my apologies, was the electronic era. And the electronic era saw us moving into mass production. Our next era, 1969, was our first digital. I mean, as we sit here today in our digital world, we can't believe that one computer probably took up in this entire studio and venue that we're in. Leap forward 41 years to 2000, and suddenly we start having the fourth revolution, evolution, the virtual world. And of course, we're all living how that's been put on steroids in the last few years. Each of these has stretched our minds, it's increased both our knowledge and our ability to deal with complexity and what we can solve and tackle for. This, in fact, presents significant opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves, our purpose, and our ability to embrace change for this next chapter that we're talking about today. Enter the generational differences in this increasing complexity, and we become aware very quickly that our baby boomers who were born up until 1964 are in fact leading the way currently on how we're rethinking about retirement. They're primarily concerned about whether they have sufficient funds to retire on, and they're also, as Louis pointed out, concerned about losing their identity. They are, in fact, though, at the cutting edge of what we are now seeing as the encore career. Closely followed by Gen X, those of us who were born from 1965 onwards through to 1980, who are starting to retire now in the next few years. Interestingly, their view of retirement is radically different. It's about options. I may retire early, I may change careers, I certainly want to develop myself. And a picture now starts to emerge that we no longer want to follow what's happened over the last 100-odd years on that Western-based retirement. We are looking for something in between West and East. We call that ikigai. So what is ikigai? Ikigai is a Japanese ideology associated with that nation's particular long life experience and expectancy. Iki means life, gai means describes value or worth, putting them together, finding joy in your life. In ikigai, it starts with 4 quadrants. Consider what you love. What do you love doing? What are you good at? What can you get paid for? And what does our world actually need? When you reflect on those 4 quadrants, in reimagining your happiness and your purpose, and reimagining work after retirement, ikigai sits in the center as they all intersect. You therefore have the opportunity with the evolution revolution to not only start a new chapter or encore career, you have the amazing option to now finally follow your passion, purpose, and intentional living. Sometimes lifetime aspirations actually find their home in retirement. For so many professionals, it's a transition into a new chapter and to live their dream. In our South African context, we can actively become part of a solution, from mentorship, skills transfers, a brand new career where South Africa needs us, our entrepreneurs, our green movement, our youth education. Can you just imagine the collective wisdom in this summit today? 2,000 people with 30 years service. That's 60,000 years of wisdom and experience that we can play forward and enjoy your next you. So what is next? What is next for you? I'm going to introduce you to our journey map. And this is a journey map that is purpose-driven. It's normally not a lastminute.com decision, but something that has percolated for years, maybe even decades. And it does require some introspection, discussion with your family, and planning. A great place to begin is deciding, what is my motivation point? Are you following your passion? Is it about social upliftment? Or are you a change agent that can really, shake things up a bit? Moving then into networks, building networks in order to assist development of your 4th chapter, or making networks who will become part of your 4th chapter. And then if we are making a career shift, studying, researching, your graduation awaits. Finally, commit. It's radical, it's change, don't give up. Follow the dream. And finally, begin your version of retirement. So in concluding today's discussion, I want to give you a how-to guide. I really only need you to remember 3 important things from my session today. The first one is, find your ikigai, and it doesn't matter what age you are. You can never start planning too early. The second thing is, take advantage of the revolution evolution. We have been given such a benefit with the learning ability and access to information that we should always be taking part in what is our big next. Finally, develop your journey roadmap. Take away the journey roadmap and start having that introspection. Go back to when you were 18. Think about, what did I want to be? And yes, I became this professional. But what else did I want to be? What did I pause along the way that I can potentially brush off and now take forward?
Thank you so much, Bongani, and good afternoon, everyone. Really good to be with you this afternoon. Eat, sleep, and move. The tenets and the pillars of good health. When it comes to eating, apologies from the medical fraternity. We have confused everybody. No one knows what healthy eating means anymore. First, fat was bad for us. Now it's good for us. I remember telling patients, watch how many eggs you eat. Turns out there is no correlation between egg intake and heart attacks. For 40 years, the American Heart Association said, watch your cholesterol intake in your diet. They scrapped that in 2016, said there's no impact, which means you and I can have as many eggs as we like and should, because they're nutritional bombshells, with no fear of a heart attack or effect on our cholesterol. How cool is that? So it still leaves us with, but what do we eat then? Well, the simple rule, and that hasn't changed, is eat more real food, eat less junk food or processed food. So that's eating. Sleeping, big one, guys, huge. And gentlemen, when it comes to sleeping, the issue is testicles. Yes, I said it. On a PPS Retirement Summit, testicles. Why? Because if you're sleeping 5 hours or less, men who sleep 5 hours or less have significantly smaller testicles than men who sleep 7 hours or more. And what's more, you have a testosterone profile of a man 10 years your senior. So 5 hours or less, you're not doing yourself any favors. You're getting old quickly. So sleep essential, and it's not just men, it's for women as well, of course. In fact, we do a global sleep experiment every year on 1.7 billion people across 67 countries. It's called daylight saving. On the day that we shorten our sleep by an hour, we see an increase in heart attacks of 24% on that day only. And when we see, when we change daylight saving and we get an extra hour of sleep, on that day we see a decrease in heart attacks of 21%. And we see that same profile for motor vehicle accidents, for suicides. Sleep is vitally, vitally important. And we're going to spend a lot of time on move, well, a little bit of time on move now, because that's really key when it comes to good health. I don't want to spend too much time on the how and the what. I think you guys would know that. I wanted to speak to exercise literally in the context of COVID as well, because COVID, sleep also vitally important. If we're sleeping 7 hours or less, our T lymphocytes, those specialized immune cells, their efficacy is reduced, and our risk of getting COVID goes up 3 times. That's by sleeping 7 hours or less. That should get all of us sleeping. When it comes to exercise, however, exercise is a double whammy on COVID. It naturally enhances our immunity, and it dampens our stress response, which presses our white cells down. And it then therefore just enhances immunity. And it does it immediately, where sleep takes a while to get immunity up. So if you are wanting to protect yourself from COVID over and above the vaccine that I hope you've, then exercise is the way. How and what of exercise, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, other than there's no best exercise in the world. In fact, the best exercise that you and I should be doing is the one we love to do, because we'll keep doing it. And that's scientific. It's not a fun little statement or a lame statement. Science has shown no value that one exercise has over another, as long as you do it at the density for your fitness levels. What I do want to say, though, is as we get into retirement and the older we get, we need to be doing far more strength training and far less cardiovascular training on a ratio basis. Because if you're inactive, here's what happens to your body. You get a loss of muscle mass from the age of 30 onwards. In fact, 10% of your muscle mass is decreased. You get a decrease in metabolic rate, the rate at which we burn fuel, and an increase in fat accumulation if we're inactive. Now, the only kind of exercise that combats those 3 nasty effects of aging and inactivity is strength training. Not running, cycling, swimming, strength training, resistance training, push-ups and lunges and those kinds of things. This is a condition the World Health Organization describes as robbing more people of more productive years of their life than any other condition. It's not dandruff, it is, and it's not balding either. It's anxiety and depression. 1 in 6 people pre-COVID in our country are battling with depression. 1 in 6, guys. It is the new normal, and it is not out of the ordinary. And again, are you at risk for depression? This is a study done by some New Zealand scientists almost 2 decades ago. 2 questions that accurately predicted your risk for depression. And here was this: during the past month, have you been often bothered by feeling down, depressed, or hopeless? First question. Second question, during the past month, have you often been bothered by a little interest or pleasure in doing things? If that's you, you may be at risk for depression. What can you do about it other than speak to someone who knows and who can help you? Well, again, I've asked you a whole bunch of questions in the last 10 minutes. What's the answer been to date? Exercise, of course. Move more, as much as you can. You've heard of happy hormones, endorphins, the runner's high. Well, that's something that we produce, these beautiful neurochemicals that are painkillers that make us feel good, and they're not reserved for runners only. Any kind of exercise triggers norepinephrine, triggers endorphins. In fact, the more intensely you exercise, the more endorphins you get. The question is, how effective are they against depression? And the answer quite simply is, again, wonderful study compared Prozac and exercise when it came to treating mild to moderate depression, and they found no statistical difference. So it really does have an impact on managing and keeping you mentally healthy.
Thank you, Bongani, and thank you to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. So let's have a look at the Rand. Now, we know the Rand is one of the most liquid emerging market currencies. So ironically, when we look at weakness in the Rand, it's actually, in most instances, got very little to do with the South African fundamentals. In fact, it's more of a reflection of global uncertainty and a contraction in global liquidity. So this is why forecasting the Rand has certainly been something that's been impossible to do, and in fact, quite a dangerous strategy at all. When we look at where we are today, certainly last week, we had a little scare. The Rand was 3% weaker. But again, when you look at what was cited, it was concerns about the Fed tapering. Tapering is really about a contraction in liquidity. So really, it's much more about global factors than it is about domestic factors. As we stand right now, it looks pretty fair value. Again, impossible to say where it will go from here, but looks reasonably priced. More and more, as we address these challenges, they have to come from local communities who are building these, not just structurally dependent on government type of systems, but systems that allow for job creation, for participation in the economy. And I think those are the big innovative strategies that we need to drive in years going forward. Now let's talk about retirement. I think when we look at, so what we have here is a map of the OECD countries. And what we look at in particular is the offshore allocation. And that's another hot topic when we talk about retirement. The offshore allocation of South Africans, if you go back to 2009, was around 9%. As we look at it in 2019, that figure is closer to 24%. So certainly we've seen South Africans over the last decade increase their exposure to offshore. You don't see it so much in some of the other countries, but particularly in South Africa, as exchange control relaxation, as the mechanism and infrastructure has increased, investors have utilized this and benefited from better risk-adjusted returns by diversifying their portfolios. But there is one other consideration to think about. When you look at your investments in the South African stock market, many of these companies have revenue in US dollars or some other hard currency, and in fact, their costs are in rands. So the average South African, when you do a look-through, is actually got a much more significant exposure to offshore than he realizes. And that's something to bear in mind as you're looking to put together diversified portfolios. In the next exercise, really what we try to do is, let's look at this challenge you've got in post-retirement. So the challenge you've got in post-retirement is, on the one hand, managing this risk of volatility, and then on the other hand, managing the risk of longevity. And that's the tricky balance to hold. While you want to be exposed to growth assets, you also want to ensure that you minimize or manage the risk of losing capital. So we did a very simple exercise, and assuming you have a 5% drawdown requirement in post-retirement, and we've looked at 4 scenarios, 15, 20, 25, and 30 years in post-retirement. It's a Monte Carlo simulation, so essentially it runs thousands of different portfolios through the system, and then it comes out with a probability of success. The probability of success is very simply the ability to be able to, for your capital to last for that duration. So let's look at what that looks like. Clearly, if your investment horizon or your post-retirement horizon is 15 years, drawing 5% puts you in a very strong position. And in fact, in most scenarios, you would achieve close to 100% success rate. of course, as that investment horizon increases, and you now look at 20 years, what you see is you need to be building up exposure to equities to offer you that protection, that real return protection that is able to keep your capital protected in real terms. Then as we move into 25 years, you start to see that requirement for growth assets increases even further. So certainly, and then when you go to 30 years, you see that even more. So there is a correlation between the duration that you would like your capital to last and the proportion of growth assets or assets that give you high real returns. Now, this is a very blunt Monte Carlo simulation. Clearly, in a financial planning process, you'd be able to distill that into a lot more specific or detailed analysis for yourself. But it does highlight the tricky balance of maintaining exposure to growth assets if you have got a longer investment horizon. Now let's talk about portfolio construction. And really what this is, it's the engineering of how we think about meeting our clients' investment needs, whether it's pre-retirement or post-retirement. You know, what we know is putting together a solution to meet a client's needs is a very different strategy from being able to just run a pure equity fund trying to outperform the market. It's got multiple different components that you've got to get right, and you've got to be able to consistently deliver that. So let's move forward into what we think about are the 5 critical steps that you've got to get right if you're going to deliver consistent performance time after time. So the first step is really about what we call screening. Screening is really about, the way we think about that is, can we search for managers, investment managers, who have an element of consistency? They're not just the top performer this quarter and then falling off the next quarter. Are they consistent in applying their philosophy? Are they consistent in applying their process? You know, is the team structure consistent? This gives us a pool of managers that tick the key boxes that we feel confident about, that we can continue to deliver that type of performance going forward. The step 2 is really around manager selection. In that process, what we want to do is, on the one hand, qualitative, so get to know the managers. What are they thinking? Are they invested in their funds? You know, on the second hand, we're looking at quants. You know, do the quantitative stats show us that this manager has been able to add value, is consistent, and is authentically sticking to the investment philosophy? Once we've gone through that process, the next step is, how do we blend these managers together? And I guess you could think about it as a sort of putting together a football team. You know, how do we blend these different positions, these different skills, in a way that optimizes the portfolio as a whole? So not just optimizes return, but also optimizes the risk that you take. Step 4 for us is all around asset allocation. Now, asset allocation is that underpin that provides the stability a portfolio requires. And that's really saying, what blend of equities, bonds, cash, global assets do we need to put together to be able to consistently achieve this target? Remember, we know what these different asset classes have delivered in the past. So we have a starting point. And that often sort of becomes our strategic asset allocation. But of course, that's the history. We need to look forward, and we need to be thinking tactically, where are the opportunities for the next 12, 18, 24 months? And that process is really the asset allocation. And that's a key underpin to the process. And then lastly, the hygiene factors. Have we checked the portfolio construction? Are we sure that all of the pieces work together? Are we looking at any risks that we need to mitigate, and any decisions we need to make? And that pretty much is the underpin for the PPS multi-manager process. Now, I just want to touch a little bit about asset allocation because it's such a fundamentally important piece in being able to achieve your investment returns. So what we have here is the efficient frontier. And what you can see is the different asset classes give you a different mix of return and volatility. Our ability to blend these different asset classes in different combinations allows us to manage the overall risk and return of the portfolio. And as you can see here on the chart on the right, the strategic benchmark for the CPI plus 5 versus the all-share index, you can see that smoother journey. You can see the contractions or the declines in the market tend to be much more muted, and you tend to see also good, strong recoveries. You may not be able to read some of the fine print, but really what that shows is that the drawdown percentages in a CPI diversified portfolio tends to be a lot less than if you were invested in equities. And that's really that downside protection or the less volatility that you're looking for in a multi-asset class portfolio. So in summary, I think we spoke a little bit about the Rand. It is something I guess we all get quite emotional about from time to time. It is a big factor in the financial planning process, and certainly from time to time as South Africans, we can become pessimistic. However, when we look at the data in a cold, hard way, what we realize is the Rand is pretty much fair value against the dollar, and it has been over these last 35 years. In fact, it's very much along its PPP line. We also think going forward, I think we face many challenges as a global economy, and one's got to be able to look beyond the traditional thinking of growth will solve our solutions or big central government will solve our solutions. We have to take responsibility in our communities to be able to find innovative ways to employ people, to bring people into the system. You know, yesterday we heard that 34% of South Africans are currently unemployed. It's a scary fact, but it's also an opportunity if we could get these 34 people back into the economy, building new technologies, new systems. Sure, we have skills shortage, but education is an opportunity. And the types of industries in food, housing, energy have huge opportunities in the years to come. So we certainly have a low base, but also a big opportunity going forward. So certainly one of the key challenges we have at the heart of our system right now is that we have the risk-free rate, the global risk-free rate in negative yields. And certainly that is going to be a challenge, but also an opportunity for countries like South Africa where we can offer good yields and we can offer good real returns. And we are seeing those capital flows coming into emerging markets. Certainly for retirees, the big challenge is balancing your need for less volatility, but at the same time managing your need for or your risk of longevity. That is the heart of the financial planning process, and it is something that we've got to get right in the years to come. In terms of managing money and achieving client outcomes, we certainly believe that manager selection, manager blending, and asset allocation are the fundamental underpins for a sustainable portfolio construction over multiple economic cycles. And of course, ultimately, good sound advice is the underpin. It is the safety net or the security net that each of us has to have in order to be able to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Anna, let me start with you. We started this conversation by talking about the lack of a savings culture in South Africa. When we think about the impact of the last 18 months, the COVID-19 pandemic, national lockdown restrictions, what consumer trends have you been able to pick up? Are people thinking differently about retirement savings?
So, Bongani, disposable incomes are under threat. They're really under a lot of pressure. When you look at the official inflation rate, which is published by the Reserve Bank, versus the real inflation rate, which is what you and I experience, you start realizing that there's a mismatch between the two. Professionals or the middle class in general are under tremendous strain because the calculation of inflation doesn't, or at least the real inflation that we experience, doesn't quite give to the same extent the proportions. For example, if you look at ESCOM, the price of electricity has gone up 4 times the 2008 price. That's a massive increase in terms of price of electricity that we consume. If you look at the real incomes that we earn because of increases in marginal tax and other indirect taxes, people are taking a lot of strain. And when they take that strain, what tends to happen is that they then look to borrowing, as Louis had mentioned, and they use the borrowing together with less disposable income, and that's creating a problem. Another one is, at a social level, is the rise of the kippers. And I'll encourage you to write this down. It's kids in parents' pockets eroding retirement savings. It used to be known as failure to launch. But on a serious note, that is something that is creating some impact on wallets because parents are having to support their children for longer. And that is a serious issue. So if I have to summarize, I will say it's inflation, it's rising debt, and then having to support children for longer is impacting retirement savings.
I mean, no country has been left unscathed by the last 18 months. Is South Africa a sure bet, or are you now starting to see people thinking about offshore investments?
Yeah, so Bongani, we've definitely seen investors looking to up their offshore exposure over the last few years. But I think it's been a very sensible strategy, and it's a strategy based on diversifying your assets, but also allowing yourself to access new and different growth opportunities and companies that you wouldn't typically be able to access in South Africa. So we've seen that increase. And we expect that to continue going forward because it does make sense from a diversification perspective. My only caution up front with the rand is be careful if you're pegging it on a bet against the currency. Do it for good, sound financial planning reasons and for the diversification benefits. And we believe that certainly we've seen over the last decade that has enhanced investors' returns.
Linda, we've spoken about this in the context of youth unemployment, but if I go back to your thoughts around retirement, if we think about the fourth industrial revolution, right, globalization, technology, what does that mean for possibilities of work and life after retirement?
Great question. It's an enabler, without a shadow of a doubt. So whether in the context of connectiveness with communities, your sports associations, or involvement, it's certainly connecting us. But more importantly, it's stretching our thinking and it's allowing us to learn new skills all along the way. And in this current world that we live in, we've been talking about COVID and the pandemic, the ability to take those skills that you have and transfer them to online and be a mentor or walk a journey with an entrepreneur as they build their business and therefore assist in building their future is just made so much more possible as a result of technology. So to me, it's an open book. We can just do so much with it.
Ever the optimist.
Always.
Ever the optimist. Louis, I mean, we've sort of touched on this already, but let's go back to it. You were talking in your presentation about spending tomorrow's money today. Part of why that happens, of course, is, as we've already heard, there's so much pressure on people's incomes even today, right? So how do we think then about putting this money for some future date when we've got all this pressure to deal with right now?
I think South Africa has got a very liberal financial industry. The banking industry is one of the best in the world. So to get back your money after lending it is a science in South Africa, which is a compliment to South Africa to have such a fluent financial system, because that's the artery system of any economy. You know, if your financial system works, there's a lot of hope for you. Only problem is poorer people, less educated people in terms of finances, they take the bait. And they don't understand really the effect of compound interest, and consumer debt can really bite you, especially when you're poor. 2-3 generations ago, I remember my dad lived in this neighborhood in the 30s, and he always told me if you went to a bank and want to borrow money to buy a car, they laughed at you. They told you, where's the 50% deposit? And I mean, that's the 30s, it's 100 years ago. It's a very new thing, the consumer credit thing. You know, it started in the 60s in South Africa, and it got its own wheels. I think we need to educate people that there's nothing wrong with debt, but there's a responsible way of going about debt. And the moment you start to get that education going, the flip side of the coin is debt on this side, saving on the other side. People will have to get the education as well, how investments work and how powerful saving can be. But I think so many people, educated people as well, step into that debt trap, and then one day when you look up, you can't believe what you're in for. It's education.
And yet so many people are left outside of that financial system as well. And to the extent that they are involved, the only way or the only entry point is through that debt trap.
Yeah, but that's what an entry point to have, you know, because you're on the back foot from day one, and they simply take back your consumer stuff you bought on debt, and there we go again, back to scratch.
And all sorts of product lines that we have at PPS. The growth in the profit share is just phenomenal. We used to talk and count the number of profit share millionaires. Now we are entering the era of profit share multi-millionaires. People sometimes don't believe this, but every year there's an allocation. That 27.7 billion in the last 10 years has been allocated amongst our members. And when they retire, they walk away with significant amounts. And we take those amounts and help them with their post-retirement investments as well, with our investments, PPS Investments business. So, but beyond our profit share, we are very focused on our niche. We focus on graduate professionals, and we've been very good at developing solutions for them, whether it be sickness cover, things like short-term insurance, full life insurance, investments, fiduciary services. We work with your advisor to create the right solutions for you. Doesn't matter what stage you are in your life. As an 80-year young business, and this year we are 80 years, we started in the Second World War. We have adaptability as part of our DNA. You know, most of our members join us as students, and they stay with us a lifetime. So, Bongani, I would say PPS, together with your advisor, form a core part of the relationship in terms of growing your money. And as I said earlier on, lifetime partnership is the PPS way.
Like a true marketer, indeed, you didn't waste that opportunity. Well, thank you very much to our panelists and our speakers, and really thank you to all of you who have engaged and stayed with us, both here at this event and, of course, virtually. And that means we have concluded then this PPS Retirement Summit for today. Thank you, as I say, to everyone. If you missed any of the highlights, you can be sure to catch them on the PPS website. So make sure you visit the website to be able to get some of the content, and you can get all of the information and what was presented today. The PPS Retirement Summit, making retirement work for you.
Just because you've reached retirement doesn't mean your ambition should retire too. Introducing the PPS Retirement Summit, making retirement work for you. PPS is a licensed FSP.